Thank you for joining us on This Week in Turkey. I am Murat, Türsan. Tonight, a massive potential leak scandal rocks the government. Opposition leader tries to make amends for the Roboski massacre. Former president fires shots at the government, and we will have Medyascope's Edgar Şar to break it down. Additionally, the latest inflation numbers are in, and the Ministry of Finance doesn't seem very fazed about it. But our first story tonight. CHP MP Yıldırım Kaya alleges that KPSS, or the Public Personnel Hiring Exams questions, have been leaked to an exam publishing house. In Turkey, if you want to work for the government, you usually have to pass a standardized exam. That's called the KPSS. Now, once again, this shocked the nation because back in 2011, something similar had happened. Back in 2011, a massive scandal blew wide open where the entrance exam questions were leaked to the members of the FETÖ organization, an organization then in bed with the government, but later tried overthrowing it in the 2016 coup attempt. It was speculated that the government was trying to place FETÖ members in key positions to grab a deeper hold of the state. But the ruling government denied it at that point. This week, however, Yıldırım Kaya alleges a new case and the government springs to action. The publishing house with the alleged leaks was raided just days after the allegations. However, the publishing house claims that this is nothing more than a coincidence and questions can be similar sometimes. Currently, we're not certain if the questions were in fact leaked or if this is a total misunderstanding. But what is for certain is that the government is not taking it lightly this time.
On July 31st, CHP MP Yıldırım Kaya alleged that Yararlanmak Publishing House had prior knowledge of the questions in the Public Personnel Selection Exam, or KPSS. Kaya had accused the government of leaking the questions and stated, 20 out of 20 questions in their practice exam were identical to the questions in the KPSS. Previously, you said that FETÖ stole the exam questions and gave it to their recruits. Well, FETÖ no longer exists, so where did these questions come from? Officials from the publishing house spoke to Tele1 and refuted the allegations, saying, "There is no reason to spin this just because a couple of questions matched. Other publishing houses get them right too. A few questions could be the same, it's absolutely a coincidence." Soon after, the Presidential Directorate of Communications posted on Twitter, "Our President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has instructed the State Supervisory Board to investigate the allegations regarding the leak of questions in the 2022 KPSS. The investigation will be concluded as soon as possible and the conclusions will be shared with the public." Soon after, President Erdogan retweeted the post saying, "The data obtained through the investigation by the State Supervisory Board regarding the 2022 KPSS leak will be meticulously evaluated and the necessary steps will be taken immediately." Soon after, Halis Aygun, the director of OSIM, the government body responsible for administering all standardized tests, was dismissed from his position. His dismissal raised immediate speculation of an internal strife in the ruling coalition of AKP and MHP, as Aygun was thought to be linked to Turkey's Nationalist Party MHP. However, MHP's official channels later denied any connection. Yesterday, the police raided the Yararlanmak Publishing House in Ankara. The raid lasted 7 hours while authorities confiscated dozens of computers, hard drives, books, and documents. Mustafa Serdar Gözükücük, lawyer for the publishing house, made a statement on the scene, defending that the questions alleged to be leaked to the publishing house were not identical, but only similar.
In domestic news, main opposition party CHP's chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu was in Roboski this week as the latest stop in his tour of reconciliation. Now, Kılıçdaroğlu manages to draw the limelight every week these days, leading many to speculate that he may just very well run for president in 2023, so he is worth paying attention to. But Roboski isn't just any place. In 2011, one of the greatest tragedies in the nation's history took place there. Roboski, a small town on the Iraqi border, saw 34 out of a group of 40 people killed in an airstrike by the government. The group of men were smugglers, smuggling fuel and tobacco from Iraq. Not strictly legal, but hardly warrants a death sentence. The government stated that they were thought to be terrorists at the time. There was an investigation, but nothing came of it other than the family members being prosecuted for smuggling. The Roboski massacre has since been marked as a dark day in the nation's history, and Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu says that he will get to the bottom of the tragedy. Let's go to the details.
Main opposition party CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu was in Uludere district of Şırnak province yesterday, more commonly known by its Kurdish name Roboski. This is Kılıçdaroğlu's latest stop in his tour to make amends with the oppressed minority groups in Turkey. In 2011, the United States notified Turkey that a drone had detected a group of 40 moving from Iraq to Turkey. The Turkish authorities, having reviewed the drone footage, determined that the group were armed militants and conducted an airstrike, killing 34 people. 18 of the people killed were minors, and 28 belonged to the same family. It was later revealed that the group were smugglers, smuggling diesel, cigarettes, and other goods from Iraq. According to the Pentagon, the United States had offered to conduct a more detailed surveillance of the smugglers prior to the airstrike, but the Turkish officials declined the offer. A parliamentary investigation had found no deliberate wrongdoing by the state officials. However, some family members of the deceased were prosecuted for illegal border crossing and smuggling. The event has long been considered an act of deliberate violence in the Kurdish community and has since been known as the Roboski massacre. Kılıçdaroğlu met with the victims' families for over 2 hours under heavy security. During the meeting, Kılıçdaroğlu said, "I came here to promise you that I will bring this case to light. Justice must be served. It must be brought to light. We can only reconcile after it has been brought to light. This won't bring back the deceased. I am aware of this. We all are. But the mothers of Roboski must have closure."
Next up in politics, if you've never heard of the name Abdullah Gül, that's not completely odd because he has been out of politics for a little while. But he did say some things this week that made some people speculate, is he back in? Now, one of the founding members of AKP, Abdullah Gül, has held many positions during his stint with the party. He was an MP, Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Deputy Prime Minister, actual Prime Minister, and then finally President. But after his first term was up in 2014, he did not seek the position for a second term, and soon after, he completely left AKP. Now, it had always been speculated that he didn't leave the government on amicable terms, but he had mostly been silent on politics since. Well, no longer, because this week, former president had a few deep criticisms for the current government, everything from inflation numbers to their religiosity. Let's go to the video.
Former president and co-founding member of President Erdogan's AKP, Abdullah Gül, had harsh criticism for the ruling government this week. Gül has always been a controversial figure, being openly and staunchly religious. He briefly served as the prime minister after AKP came to power in 2002 and allowed Erdogan to run for office by lifting his lifetime ban from holding political office. In 2013, he signed a bill restricting alcohol consumption, which was thought to have served as a contributing factor to the massive Gezi protests in 2013. In 2014, he left office and did not seek re-election, and President Erdogan took over the position. Previously launching only minor criticisms against the party he had left behind, Gül spoke to Karar's Mehmet Ocaktan and remarked, "Back when I was president, I had said the parliamentary system was more suitable for Turkey, but I was never categorically against it. But the constitution we have today was designed to concentrate power in one hand. That's the intention behind its design. Thus, it was not a document created by the best legal minds and constitutional scholars of the country." Gül also took shots at AKP, criticizing its religious grandstanding. If you present yourself as the representative of a religion or present your party as the religion party, in the end, everything you do will be ascribed to religion. This is very dangerous. What you instead have to do is remove any obstacles in front of religious freedom. Other than that, it must not be allowed to use religion as a tool. Google also commented on the ongoing economic crisis in Turkey, saying, "I want to tell you this first. What amazes me is how lightly inflation is being taken. These are the last moments to, rationally, strongly combat and get inflation under control. Especially for governments that value religious morality, it's not enough to just keep interest rates low if you are a government that values religious morals. In order to be able to protect people from other hardships, the priority must be to get inflation under control."
Joining me now in the studio, Medyascope's politics extraordinaire, Edgar Şar. Edgar, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, Edgar, let's talk about the potential KPSS scandal. Now, everyone is innocent until proven otherwise. It could just end up being a coincidence, but what is for certain at this point is that the government did spring to action very, very quickly. What do you make of this whole thing?
Well, it's something I focused on my column as well that will be published tomorrow, but available only in Turkish.
I'll translate.
Well, I think it's deeper than, we are discussing. It's deeper than, we expect, because Turkey, has never been a full-fledged democracy. But Turkey, unlike other countries in its east and also south, with which it shares a geography and also history, Turkey has achieved to have some very important elements of a modern state. And this public recruitment based on merit-based central exams are one of these, actually, because everyone knows that if they are good, well-educated, if they do what they have to do, and they have a shot at being employed, recruited in state, which people had the perception which would give them a future, a guaranteed future. The first blow to that prospect was made at that time by the Gülenists in 2010, 2011, the organization that is commonly known as FETÖ currently, when they create some kind of an algorithm or what to get their associates have the best results in the exams. And since then, actually, many things happened and a lot of water under the bridge. And the issue is that people do not have the same confidence anymore, the confidence that they used to have in the state institutions. Today, there is a potential scandal. And, the president charged the State Inspection Committee to investigate the issue. He also dismissed the chair of, the ÖSYM, the organization that is responsible of organizing all the exams. But, that those developments make us think that the government has nothing to do with the scandal, right? But we have a story on that. And it's very difficult for the people in general, and especially the government skeptics, to think like this. I mean, even if the government is now doing what it has to do, investigating the issue properly, and will bring those responsible about the scandal to justice, people do not have the confidence anymore. So it's very problematic, and I think whoever the next government will be should, somehow focus on rebuilding this confidence and rebuilding the state. So this will be one of the most important pillars of that confidence.
I see. Now, while we're on the subject of next government, this seems like a pretty smooth transition to point number 2. Let's talk about Roboski.
Yeah.
Now, Roboski was the latest stop in Kılıçdaroğlu's famous tour of making amends and reconciling with minority groups in Turkey. Now, this may be a little cynical, but I think at this point we're all thinking that Kılıçdaroğlu is probably going to run for president. And do you think reconciling with the mothers of Roboski and minority groups in general actually give him a shot at comfortably winning the presidency? Are these events going to help him get his poll numbers up? What do you think?
Well, certainly yes. Right? But before, we have to discuss what this reconciliation means, or the journey of Kılıçdaroğlu to reconcile with all these groups. It's not only with minority groups, by the way. Actually, Kılıçdaroğlu focuses on particular groups of the society which have been conventionally distant to CHP, or we can also say which have been systematically neglected by CHP. Like, for example, conservatives. They are not minority, they are pretty much a majority in Turkey. And Kurds, they are a minority, but neglected by CHP for years. At least there's been such a perception. And non-Muslims also. And also Kılıçdaroğlu does not want to make feel its own base neglected in that sense. And so he's just, he must have made a list of groups and people that have been damaged or negatively affected by all the mistakes that have been either made by the state or by the CHP itself. So it's just like the goal of the entire reconciliation thing is that, okay, the government will change, but it's not enough. We have to open a new page. Totally white, totally new. And this is only how we can, start to heal our wounds. And this is how we can, make a real start. Yeah. So I think it will be, when we, compare Kılıçdaroğlu's numbers, of the time when he first started this journey and now, well, there is a difference. So it can make us think that, yes, this will positively affect his bid to run for president. However, I think Roboski has a particular importance in that. Why? Because when we look at the numbers, we see that the People's Alliance of President Erdogan and the Nations Alliance of CHP and E-Party, we see that those alliances have almost same, percentages in different polls. In some of the polls, Nations Alliance are slightly higher, and in others, People's Alliance. But they are, more or less in the same level, which make us conclude that the decisive, vote share will be that of HDP. That is the Kurds. So I think we have to also consider this very fact when we analyze Kılıçdaroğlu's focus on Roboski and the Kurdish issue in general, or his remarks on Demirtas, that he is, unrightfully in prison, etc., and that he will be released immediately after the government change. So it's a very bold statement, actually. So I think it's about the presidential election, of course. But of course, the incident is a big tragedy. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, 34
out of a group of 40 were killed.
Yes, were killed, and most of them were kids.
Yeah,
and it was a big mistake made by the state. So it's very much, a topic that can be considered within the scope of reconciliation project of Kılıçdaroğlu. So it makes sense that he went there. And we are also observing that his support numbers are constantly increasing among Kurds.
They're creeping up there, for sure.
Yeah.
He has seen good new ground in the Kurdish demographic.
And he also promised them to bring those responsible to justice. So it's a big promise. And if he can really achieve that goal, I think it would be a big difference he could make. But of course, first of all, he could, nominate. He could be nominated by the opposition and then win the elections and then start to govern. And then, it's, a big...
that's a little ways away.
Yes, yeah.
So
a long way to go.
Exactly. Let's not hedge our bets yet. Now, Final question. Let's talk about Abdullah Gül here. Now, the former president finally broke his silence on the government and launched a few deep criticisms, one would say. Now, he used to say a few things here and there, but never this openly, never this blatantly, right? What do you make of this? Why now? Why is he talking?
I'm not sure if this is really of a big relevance anymore. If any, he had a shot at running for president against Mr. Erdogan in the previous general elections in 2018. At that time, the project belonged to chairman of Saadet Partisi, Temel Karamollaoğlu, and Kılıçdaroğlu was okay with the idea. I'm not sure how enthusiastic he was, but he was okay with the idea. But that project failed because Meral Akşener started to run herself. Yeah, whether good or bad, I don't know, because we, as opposed to some common ideas, I have never seen a poll in which Abdullah Gül was winning against Mr. Erdogan. Some people claim that there were, but I have never seen such. And I am following the Turkish politics, as you know. So
yeah, I think you might be into it a little bit.
Yes. So I don't think these remarks point out to willingness of Mr. Gül to run again. Yeah, I'm sure there are some people, some groups within the opposition that want him to do that. But if he didn't do this last time in 2018, I don't think any reason why he will do this time, because now his chances are even lower. Yeah, because at that time there were no potential candidates who many people would believe to win against Mr. Erdogan. But today, unlike at that time, there are many potential candidates, and there have been already some disputes about who should run. So and these discussions, I don't think that these discussions need Mr. Gül even. Yeah. But we know that day by day it's getting more costful to keep one's mouth shut about what's going on in Turkey. To have to keep your reputation intact. You have to sometimes make some statements. If you don't like something, you have to speak about it, because you have to speak up about it, actually, because you are a former president, and it's very normal that he does that. There are many people who believe in the sincerity of Mr. Gül about his lack of contentness about what's going on in Turkey. But because he's been too cautious about anything he wants to say, wants to do, he's been too cautious. And this cautiousness actually makes us conclude that I don't think he will have any new political ambition anymore. So he once said that he gave up politics, daily politics, and I think at that time he called it a career.
I see.
Yeah.
So let's not run to the bank with it. He's just a regular former president speaking his mind and voicing his concerns.
Yes.
All right, Edgar, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Well, former President Gül may be taking the inflation numbers seriously, but that doesn't mean everyone is. The Ministry of Treasury and Finance, Murat made news again this week when he proclaimed in a TV interview that he was still gleefully able to show his face in public despite the double or triple-digit inflation numbers. The government released the inflation numbers this week, and like always, there is strong disagreement between the government's numbers and the numbers of the independent inflation research group, ENAG. The government says the annual inflation is at 80%, whereas ENAG says it's 180%. Quite a bit of difference. Let's go to the details.
The Turkish Statistical Institute released July's inflation numbers, stating inflation was up by 2.37% this month, landing the annual CPI at 79.6%. The highest rise was seen in transportation at 119%, food at 94%. Meanwhile, the lowest rise was seen in communications at 26%, and education at 25%. The TSI had announced last month's numbers at 78%, up only 2.3% this month, which fell in stark contrast with the independent inflation research group ANOG, which released this month's CPI increase at 5.03%. According to ANOG, inflation was up over 176% in the last 12 months, and was up 80.35% just since the beginning of 2022. Marmara University Faculty of Economics Head of International Economics Department Mehmet Şişman spoke to Medyascope and said,
The war in Ukraine, through the rise in oil prices, has been a contributing factor to inflation. But monetary politics has been the deciding factor. Demand for credit has grown immensely, and as a result, we are faced with very high inflation. We are facing the highest inflation of the last 25 years.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Treasury and Finance, Nureddin Nebati, was less fazed about the historic inflation numbers. On a TV interview, Nebati said,
I was talking with the minister of another country the other day, and he was saying, your inflation numbers are really high. I said, yes, they are. I said, we will fight this, we will resolve this, we are determined. But look, I can show my face in public with these inflation numbers, but you can't show your face in public with 10% inflation.
And with that, that's it for us in This Week in Turkey. I have been Murat, Türsan. Folks, if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel and support us on Patreon if you can. A special thanks to Mehmet Tanverdi for news text and Kathleen Phelps for voiceovers. And thank you for joining us.
Türkiye'nin sivil, bağımsız, özgür ve çoğulcu bir medya ortamına ihtiyacı var. Medyascope, 20 Ağustos 2015'te bu ihtiyacı karşılamak üzere yola çıktı. Ama yolumuz uzun. Bu yolculukta bize Patreon veya YouTube'un katıl butonu üzerinden katkıda bulunabilirsiniz. Destek verin, sizinle güçlenelim.